Thank you. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, thank you for being here, for your years of service, and for the great work that so many of the people in the FBI do every single day. Before I ask you a question, though, I think it's very important. I was the last member to leave the Senate chamber, and I observed the Capitol Police doing an extraordinary job in shepherding every single member and every single staff to safety. So I hope as they're reviewing some of the officers, we should go through a review. I hope that we're tracking their entire pattern of movement that day. I think you'll see many of them were doing putting themselves between us and violence, and we need to make sure that we treat them fairly. But back on the rioters on January the 6th, can you give me a rough idea just of the crimes that many of them are being charged with or being pursued through investigations?
Well, we're using a variety of statutory weapons. There are certainly assault charges. There are a number of charges that are specific. By that I mean assault against, federal law enforcement, including the Capitol Police, the brave men and women of the Capitol Police that I think you rightly credited there. There's also various charges related to destruction of federal property, things along those lines. We are now starting to begin to see, as we've sort of taken care of the most immediate, easiest to prove, I hate to use a word like low-hanging fruit charges, yep. But now we're starting to get more of the more advanced charges, if you will. So, we've had some conspiracy charges recently. Some of the people that are more involved with different forms of planning or coordination or preparation, and some of those charges are starting to happen, and I would expect to see that continue. Incidentally, Mr. Chair, I want to associate myself with Senator Graham's comments earlier. I think your threats are going up, and we've got to match that with additional resources. So I look forward to the committee continuing that. Would you see any difference between the charges, the investigations that you're pursuing in the events on January 6th and charges that should be pursued against federal buildings and federal law enforcement officers being harmed in Seattle or Portland? Are there active investigations for either of those two events, and would they be treated any differently? As I think said in response to an earlier question, we are equal opportunity. So by that I mean we don't care what ideology motivates you. If you're engaged in violence that violates federal law, we're coming for you. And that's just true for the events over the summer and some of the domestic terrorism that occurred. Are there active investigations related to those events? Yes. Thank you. I feel like you mentioned in response to one of the members' questions about this just increasing, the volume's increasing. I've introduced in the last Congress, I intend to reintroduce a bill called Protect and Serve, which increases penalties for rioters for assaults on federal officers and more significant consequences. Do you think that those would be helpful tools for law enforcement? Certainly. And for prosecution? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. I think, while I'm not familiar with the specific bill, I want to enthusiastically support the idea of looking at everything we can do to protect the men and women of law enforcement. The threats, the violence against law enforcement in this country is one of the most tragic and sometimes least talked about challenges we face. This year alone, an officer is shot and killed in the line of duty at a rate of more than one a week. Mm-hmm. And when you think about what it takes for someone to be willing to sacrifice his or her life for a total stranger, and how unusual that is, just to begin with, and then you add on top of that somebody who's willing to do that, get up and do that every single day, day after day after day, and they never know when that day might be the day that they don't come home to their families. And so then you put that in the context of the way in which some violent opportunists or domestic terrorists hijack some of these protests, whether it's the ones over the summer or the ones on the 6th. And now you got some of these same selfless individuals who are, in many cases, killed, but for everyone who's killed, there's someone who's survived, thank goodness, but whose life and his family's life is forever altered.
And I don't think we could ever and should ever take for granted those people because they protect all of us.
I agree. I'm curious, with all the discussion of defund the police and systemic racism and all law enforcement agencies, some of the dialogue that's out there, have you seen any measurable decrease in the number of people who are trying to apply to come in to the FBI? I know I'm seeing it, and state troopers are telling me their applications for academies are down by over 70%. We see people accelerating their retirements. Do we have any potential threat out there, either within the FBI or for law enforcement in general, of having fewer people willing to get into this profession?
So certainly when it comes to state and local law enforcement, because I talk to many of the same chiefs and sheriffs you do, the recruiting challenge is a real concern, and it comes up all the time. That's something we need to be concerned about, and all of these trends that we're talking about will have, I think we run the risk of that, just making that trend worse. At the FBI, happily, because we can all use some good news from time to time, last year and the year before, we tripled the number of people, Americans across the country, applying to be special agents. So when I took the job, it was around 11,000 or so a year, people applying to be special agents. In 2019, it was about 36,000. And then last year, even with the pandemic, it was even higher than that. And that's the highest number of people applying to work at the FBI as special agents to put their lives on the line in about a decade. So we'd like to think our work is earning people who want to come work for us, and we're grateful for that. And hopefully we can do our part to try to encourage more people, because we can only take so many of them, to pursue law enforcement jobs in other agencies.
Well, that is good news. I just wish you all the best of luck in prosecuting every single person that you can that breached the Capitol, and every single person on the grounds who assaulted or threatened a police officer, if there's anything that we can do to help. And I will follow up with the department to get your perspective as to whether or not you think the Protect and Serve Act would be helpful. I think that it will be, but I'd like your professional judgment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Wray. Greetings from your home state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. There's been a significant increase in shootings and violent crime nationwide over the last 18 months. There were at least 10 people shot in Atlanta, Georgia on Sunday. What does the FBI assess is driving this crime wave?
Well, certainly I am following the same trends you are with concern, not just in Atlanta, but in other cities around the country. I'm not sure there's any single factor that's driving it. I think it's a variety of things. We are seeing, some of it may be, the pandemic itself in its own way has had an impact. There are people who are maybe not at jobs or not, not in school or not otherwise available, and there's more potential for wrongdoing to occur. We've talked about some of the challenges with local police departments and some of the issues there in terms of their recruiting and staffing. A lot of them are understaffed in addition to the recruiting challenge, so that's a problem. So there are a variety of drivers that we think contribute to it, but the violent crime problem over the last year in particular, 2020, is something that is a great concern and that we are very warily keeping our eye on. It doesn't get the same kind of headlines as some of the other threats we've talked about today, but as your question, I think quite rightly implies, it's a subject that's near and dear to the hearts of all the people we know back home.
Yeah, well, with that many shootings in Atlanta on Sunday alone, this increase in violent crime is of grave concern to Georgians and people across the country. Will you work with this committee and my office to try to refine that assessment of the drivers of this violent crime wave?
We'd be pleased to do that. I commend you for your interest in the violent crime problem back in our home state.
Appreciate that, Director Wray. Next week will be the first anniversary of the shooting death of Breonna Taylor, a young woman who died when police officers in Louisville, Kentucky entered her home with a battering ram executing a no-knock search warrant connected to a narcotics investigation. Ms. Taylor was not the subject of that warrant. There's obviously been deepening and grave concern about equal justice, due process, the extent of brutality, harassment, discrimination faced by Black Americans in the criminal justice system growing over the last year, given incidents such as this one, without commenting on the specifics of the late Ms. Taylor's case. Is the FBI prioritizing investigations of cases involving color of law violations under 18 U.S.C. 242, and what resources have you instructed your field offices to commit to those investigations?
So as you say, I can't discuss the Taylor case specifically. We have an ongoing federal investigation there, but we are definitely trying to push forward on color of law cases. We do that through our Civil Rights Division within our Criminal Investigative Division. We are, in addition to the investigations we're pursuing, and we have quite a number around the country, we are also trying to contribute by doing different forms of training and outreach to state and local police departments so they understand better kind of where the lines are and where we fit into it. So that's a part of it as well. We're also trying to contribute to the situation by encouraging better reporting. We've had a lot of conversations this morning in other contexts about statistics and reporting. And when it comes to use of force, we are trying to build out a use of force database that involves use of force by police departments, law enforcement agencies around the country. It's voluntary. We can't mandate all these local police departments to provide the information, but we are doing a lot to encourage them to submit their data. And my pitch to them has been, we're going to be talking about these issues no matter what, and we should all want the conversations to be based on the actual facts and the actual data, as opposed to what some random person thinks the facts or data are. And so we are now reached one of the thresholds where we can start doing some of the reporting related to this effort. We need to get to a certain threshold statistically. I think it's like 80% or something of police departments before the data is considered statistically reliable. But so investigations, training and outreach, more complete statistical reporting.
you.